Almost 9. Are we live? Are we live? Okay, good.
It all worked when she got home.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to those who are here with us. Nice to see you. Hope we can get done before the snowstorm arrives for you. I'm going to call this meeting to order, the February edition of the Muskoka Lakes Planning Committee, calling it to order at 9 a.m. I can confirm that we have a quorum. We have 6 members in the room with us, and we have at least 2 online. Also we have the Director of Development Services and Environmental Sustainability, the CAO, and other senior staff are present. The agenda was published, and input was invited through the email to the township. Today's meeting is being live streamed and recorded at the Township of Muskoka Lakes website and YouTube channel. By participating in the open public meeting, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded and posted online. We have no supplementary agenda, so what was published is what we will be going through today. For those who are speaking, if you've been before, you will know that you have a 5-minute limit, and I will call you up when we're ready. So our first item on the, do we have any disclosures of pecuniary interest today? Seeing none. Very well. And we have no invited guests, so we will go right into our first concurrent zoning bylaw and consent application. And I think that is Ms. Walker. You have the floor without a 5-minute limit.
Yeah, that's not Ms. Monck.
Oh,
Anyway, it's
I
fine.
guess I wrote it down wrong. All right, I'm reading the wrong piece of paper. Sorry. How did I get that wrong?
That's okay. I think you guys know who I am at this point. Thank you, Chair Bosenworth. The first applications to be heard are concurrent consent application B5423ML and zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 0224 in the names of Hess and Mills. The subject lands are known municipally as 1532 Acton Island Road. I would direct committee's attention to the submitted consent and zoning sketch on page 24 of the agenda package. The purpose and effect of concurrent consent application and zoning bylaw amendment application is to create one new waterfront residential lot, to grant an easement over the retained lot in favor of the severed lot to provide access to existing hydro pole and line infrastructure, and to permit a cumulative dock width for the maximum cumulative dock width for the severed lot, which exceeds the maximum permitted. Notice of this public meeting under the Planning Act was circulated 22 days in advance of this meeting, and 8 comments have been received to date. Comments were received from Nick Snyder, the township's chief building official, and the district municipality of Muskoka's planning department, both stating no objection to the application. Comments were received from Tim Sopko, the township's manager of public works, stating that it is unclear if there is shared servicing, hydro, septic water between the proposed retained and severed lots. It is the recommendation that all servicing should be located upon the property which it serves. The severance should be subject to confirmation of the availability of an entrance permit for the severed lot. If access is to remain as shown on the site plan, a right-of-way should be registered in favor of the severed lot for the access across the retained lot. Further, both the retained and severed lots should have separate civic address. Civic addressing changes that are required as a result of this severance shall be completed at no cost of the township. 5 letters of support were received from the following property owners: Bruce Levan, area property owner, Gerald and Janet Assab, abutting property owners to the south, James and Maureen Pierce, area property owners, John and Amy Graham, area property owners, and Paul and Janie Mills, area property owners, all stating no objection to the application, and these letters were circulated to committee prior to today. The proposed exemption is summarized as shown on the screen. This table was included in the circulation materials and can be found in the agenda package. Staff have prepared a detailed report for committee's consideration and have recommended that consent application B5423ML Hess and Mills be approved, subject to standard conditions of consent and the following. That the owners enter into a consent agreement with the township pursuant to section 5126 of the Planning Act. Said agreement shall be registered against the title of the lands and contain provisions to the satisfaction of the township whereby the owner agrees to use soils that have a demonstrated ability to effectively retain phosphorus or equivalent septic abatement technologies, which may include the use of soils with appropriate elemental composition to bind phosphorus or pre-post treatment phosphorus controls over the long term for a private on-site sewage disposal system on the severed and retained lots, and to retain existing vegetation and to revegetate the shoreline buffer on the severed lot to the satisfaction of the township. Staff have further recommended that zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 0224 be approved, subject to a restriction in the amending bylaw to prohibit additions to the existing docks on the severed lot. Staff have no further comments at this time and are happy to answer any questions from committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crowder. I don't think we have an agent, but is the applicant here in which would they like to speak? Come on up. You'd like your name and your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, that didn't count my 5 minutes.
Yep, there you go.
Good morning, Chair, committee members and staff. My name is Nancy Mills. My address is 78 Waverly Road in Toronto, and I am one of the owners and applicants. My sister, Kathy Hess, is also an applicant in here with me. 4 generations of our Mills family have been blessed to enjoy and care for our property for 62 years. In planning for future generations, we are asking for consent to divide the existing uses on the very large property by creating 2 oversized lots with a dwelling on each. As you can see from the photo, the 1,700 feet of shoreline is heavily vegetated with natural form, far exceeding built form. Shoreline built density at 2% is extremely low in terms of bylaw requirements and compared to most properties in Lake Muskoka, especially Dudley Bay. There has been no new development on the property for 30 years, and none is being proposed now. And I emphasize that no development is being proposed now. We appreciate planning staff's recommendation that the draft zoning bylaw exemption be approved and have no issue with a provision that no additions to the existing docks are permitted without future planning approvals. We appreciate planning staff's positive recommendation that the consent be approved. We agree that the usual standard provisions are appropriate and reasonable. What we take issue with are the 2 consent agreement conditions that planning staff have recommended. We have concerns about the conditions themselves and about the idea of an agreement on title to implement them when we abide by the rules. The consent agreement process and registration on title as an encumbrance forever involves considerable time and cost for both the township staff and the property owner, and should not be imposed without careful consideration. First, you must determine if the condition satisfies the well-established 4 test under section 51, subsection 25 of the Planning Act. Consent conditions must relate to the nature of the development proposed and be reasonable, necessary, relevant, and equitable. In our application, there is no proposed development and no impact on surrounding properties, the shoreline, or the lake. Therefore, conditions focused on managing the impact of development are not relevant. However, because these conditions have been raised by planning staff, I will speak to each of them with respect to the 4 tests. With the proposed condition for soil usage monitoring, the following additional information illustrates why the suggested condition is not relevant or necessary. The existing aquarobic septic system, which was inspected by the township in 2023 and is maintained annually, will continue to service the severed lot. Prior to submitting our applications, a permit was issued by the township for a new septic system to service the cottage building. To impose additional requirements for soil testing and monitoring where there is a permit process in place to be completed is not reasonable or equitable in the circumstances. From a technical perspective, we wish to point out that official plan section E 4.2.2C, referred to in staff report, only applies when there is proposed construction or reconstruction, which is not the case here. And it is our understanding that both the official plan sections referred to in the report are under appeal and therefore don't have full force and effect at this time. Slide 8, please. With respect to the suggested condition for retention of existing vegetation and tree planting on the shoreline buffer of the severed lot, we offer the following additional information. This photo, taken in the spring, shows the beach and rock cliff area in context of the whole severed lot. The vast majority of its 740 feet of shoreline is green, natural, and undeveloped. There is no built form in between the beach and the rock cliff that needs buffering. Slide 9, please. These photos show the beach area in the summer and how it has become healthier and greener over 40 years. The natural sand beach and the grasses, wildflowers, trees, and rock cliff behind it have existed for decades, providing a stable shoreline environment for all types of wildlife. Slide, and you would see in there, sorry, we actually, some of the trees that we guy wired to try and save are in that one photo. Slide 12, please. These two photos show the extent of the shoreline buffer in the beach area. It is comprised of about 25 feet of sand, and beyond that, 25 feet of grasses and wildflowers. Sand together with natural grasses serve as effective filters of sediment in the water runoff from upland areas. Across the grassy area, there are weeping tiles installed decades ago that have effectively prevented beach and shoreline erosion for over 45 years. Section 51, subsection 24H of the Planning Act refers to conservation of natural resources and flooding as one of the criteria that must be considered. The revegetation condition would in fact threaten the stability of the land and shoreline by causing flooding if the weeping tiles are dug up or disturbed. For all these reasons, the tree planting condition for this area is not reasonable and we believe would be harmful.
Ms. Mills, you are at your 5 minutes, so if you can wrap it up for us.
I can. Slide 13, please. Existing trees on the shoreline are already protected by the tree preservation bylaw, which we will continue to abide by. In summary, we ask that committee recommend approval, but without the consent agreement condition, similar to what council has done for the lot line adjustments before you in the past, where the focus is on the dividing line between existing and no development is proposed. Thank you.
Thank you
I'm
very
available
much.
for questions.
Any questions from committee at this moment? We can always come back later. Thank you very much, Ms. Mills.
Thank you very much.
Is there anybody else wishing to speak in support of this application? And do we have anybody wishing to speak against this application? Very well. We turn it over to committee for questions. Councilor Mazin.
Thank you, and through you. Clearly, there's quite a few things that were just brought up by the applicant, and I'm curious to hear from staff specific to the discussion around these conditions being in place when construction or reconstruction happens. If I can just hear from staff as to their rationale or their direction on this, please.
And Councilor Mazin, is that for both the sewage requirement and the shoreline buffer, or just either, both or all?
Well, I think it applied to both, but maybe it
Very well.
doesn't. That's why I want to hear from staff, please.
No,
Thanks.
okay.
Through you, Chair Bosenworth, to Councillor Mazan, I think I can start speaking to this and then I may ask for some assistance, but the new official plan does include some policies surrounding lot creation on private on-site sewage disposal systems. And this lot's a bit unique in that we don't, there were two main uses we're now separating the uses, and individual on-site sewage systems should be available on each of those lots to service the main use on the respective lots. The new official plan speaks to using certain types of soils and phosphorus abating technologies when installing those types of systems. A permit has been issued for a septic system, but it's our understanding that that system has not begun construction. No inspections have taken place for that septic system. So our interpretation would be that that would be something that we would apply that policy to. As far as the vegetation, my understanding is that through a consent agreement, we can impose a condition to revegetate the shoreline buffer. And given that, I think as you can see through one of the photos there, it is a pretty drastically open field. Staff feel that it would be important to try to enhance that buffer. But I would maybe look to Mr. Sharp to speak to the imposing of such a condition where we don't necessarily have a new dwelling that's proposed on the severed lot. I don't know if he can provide some.
Mr. Sharp.
Through you, the Chair Bosworth. I would point out that development as it's defined is would include lot creation. So in this case, technically speaking, I think some development is proposed, albeit, we're not looking at a new dwelling or any development necessarily on the ground. Ultimately, what we're looking at is the creation of a proposal to create a new lot. The Planning Act does provide the approval authority, being in this case, council, the ability to impose conditions that they feel are reasonable. Looking at the intent of the conditions with respect to the consent agreement, the first consideration would be the use of soils that have the ability to bind phosphorus or similar equivalent technologies. The ultimate intent here is to protect water quality. I think the direction in the new official plan is clear. Water quality and the importance of that is paramount. We do recognize that that specific policy is under appeal. I think staff at this point are having regard to the policy and have recommended the condition. With respect to the vegetation, even based on the applicant's photos, there is a very wide portion of the shoreline that is completely open, has no vegetation, and the official plan directs that consideration be given to some revegetation in this case. And again, the way to implement that, the appropriate way to implement it would be through a consent agreement. So those would be my comments, and I'd be happy to elaborate if needed. Thank you.
Subsequent question? Yeah.
Actually, I'd like to hear from others. I may have
Very
another
well.
question after. Thank you.
Councillor Kent. Excuse me, Councillor Kent.
Thank you. I have two questions. I just want clarity because I'm having trouble with the drawings. They're very small. This is my first question. After the severance, one lot contains a 2-story boathouse with an upper story dwelling, and the other lot contains the 1.5-story cottage. Is that all that is of substance that's left apart from there's a dock? Oh, I guess there's a small cabin as well on the lot that holds the boathouse. You continue to say there's no construction plan, but I'd like some clarity on that. Is this enough accommodations for what's going to be, I guess, 2 separate family groups that are on 2 separate lots? And that's really for the agent, I guess. And then I have a second question, which I can ask now or after, which is for staff. On page 11 of the 17-page thing, we talk about a future severance. And I was a bit confused by the paragraph that says if we severed the lot further down the road, that we would still continue to be only, it was a question of the dock footage, and I would appreciate if they could take me through that first paragraph and what they mean by that. I was confused by it. I personally see this as another example, and I know there's no malintent here, You can tell by the property, you can tell by the way the family's kept it in line, but back to our official plan, you sever once, you give a concession for substantial extra dock footage, which I actually don't think is appropriate. And then they sever again, and it becomes a history of a very nice shoreline becoming overbuilt with excess frontage, excess buildings, right, and dock space on the waterfront. And I don't understand why nobody ever comes back and says, well, fine, you can sever it, but let's get rid of the swim dock. Okay, why are we always giving the 82 extra feet, or in this case, 100 feet extra to these people, despite no malintent? It's not consistent with the policy, and it sets the people up for future, sets us up for a future problem if and when another severance comes, which you have to assume is going to happen. So that was a long-winded, there's two questions, and the third is really a comment that we can discuss it later on. So the first question was for the agent, and the second question was for staff.
Ms. Mills?
Yeah, this is, sorry. I am the applicant, not the agent. And
Thank
I can confirm that the buildings are adequate for our family uses. They have been, and where there's no changes. We are not proposing any construction, any new buildings on the severed lot. We're not allowed to. We would have to come back before you for further planning approvals to do anything. So that's the appropriate time to deal with these consent agreements.
Thank you. Ms. Crowder?
Through you, Chair Bosenworth. So I will try to go through your questions, Councillor Kemp, but if I forget one, please remind me. So the staff did consider, whether we should potentially request that some of the dock width be removed at this time, but opted that should a future severance come forward, at that time, you could restrict the amount of dock width permitted on those lots created, the potential severed and retained. If committee feels that the better approach, or the approach that you would prefer, is to remove some of the existing dock width on the severed lot, you do have the authority to do so today. But staff have felt that given the orientation of the existing dock width, the inlet on the property, it doesn't have the visual appearance as much as the numbers show. But again, that is at your discretion. So you can choose to sort of tackle that today by removing certain dock width or restricting future dock width on the retained lot, or you can follow sort of staff's line of thinking and should a future severance come forward, at that time look at potential cumulative impact of shoreline structure development on those future lots.
Can I just clarify one thing? Maybe you can explain it to me. You're saying if we sever the lot in the future, if there's a further severance of the big lot, at that point, somebody wants to build a dock and a boathouse. That at that point, the condition of the severance would be that perhaps the retained lot, in that case, we'd restrict them or require them to remove some boathouses.
Yes, through you, Chair Bosenworth. Should a future severance, your understanding, I believe, is correct. At that time, we'd be dealing solely with the retained lot in this application. If that were further severed, you could impose at that time conditions on both the retained and the severed, or one or the other, should you choose, to restrict future shoreline development at that time that the lot creation application comes forward. So I think that clarifies that bit for you. And then I can go through that first paragraph if you'd like on page 11.
I'll read it again. Let me come back. Yeah, let me read it again.
All right.
Now you've given me that clarity.
Mr. Sharp.
Through you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Crowder, for your explanation. I would just also point out that staff have recommended an amendment to the bylaw that would limit dock additions on the severed lot. I think part of the reason that we're supportive of such a drastic numerical increase in width is not only for the reasons that Ms. Crowder has pointed out, but also the docks are located quite close to shore, tucked into shore. And ultimately, cumulative width restrictions are put in place with the intent to control density and built form along the shoreline. So I think with that protection in place and the significant shoreline of each of the lots, along with the protection of, if a future severance is proposed, that would come back in front of us and staff, and the approval authority would have the opportunity to put even more restrictions in place. So I think we're comfortable with it. Thank you.
Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you. Know the property well. Excellent, old Muskoka, beautiful piece of our place. I guess I'm certainly supportive of staff. I just have the two questions as it relates to this consent agreement as expressed by Ms. Mills. First of all, the soil, just for my or other audience information, are these soils that are phosphorus friendly? Is this readily available? Is this a product that I realize it's likely a product of our new official plan? Is this an onerous ask, I guess is the question. And then secondarily, as it relates to retaining existing vegetation, et cetera. I mean, that the uniqueness of this property is things like a beach that's been there forever. And so I'd like staff to speak to that in terms of to the extent that we're expecting these folks to refurbish, if you will, some of this. Thank you.
Ms. Crowder, two questions, one on the availability of soils and more thoughts on the beach.
Yeah, sure thing. Through you, Chair Bosenworth, to Councillor Zavitz. I'll speak to the second question first. The beach area, we are able to tell through aerial photos dating back in time that is a natural beach. So we're not suggesting that beach be removed or any plantings go in the beach area. It's more so the area behind the beach. And I have been in talks with Ms. Mills and Ms. Hess that regarding the number of plantings. I mean, staff aren't looking for a forest to be put in. I think that would be quite onerous on the owners. But more so we were thinking around as a starting point, 15 or so trees and some shrubs throughout. So because I mean, if you're looking at it, I could see as an owner being concerned that I would have to reforest the entire field. So we have had discussions about that and sort of the extent that staff would be hoping to achieve. But it is usually sort of a back and forth discussion with the property owners about placement and types of trees and number. So we try to work with applicants as much as we can to reach a plan that is agreeable on both sides. So that's the second question you had. And then the first about the septic technologies. I think maybe I'll defer to Mr. Sharp or Mr. Pang, because I know they were much more involved in the writing of the policy itself. But my understanding is that where septic's proposed, those soils will be tested and will be looked at for their ability to bind phosphorus. And if it's determined that the soils that are present aren't adequate, either you're looking at other abatement technologies or bringing in soils that do have a better ability to bind phosphorus. But as far as the availability of those soils or the frequency of what kind of soils we have commonly here and whether that's required often, I'd maybe rely on my counterparts.
Mr. Sharp, can you talk on the availability of these soils?
Thank you, Chair. Similar conditions have been imposed for quite some time in the township, mainly, when a lot is proposed to be created on a lake that would have been considered a concern under the district municipality of Muskoka's former lake system health program. I think as the science has evolved with respect to water quality in the district and through the official plan update, when an application is brought forward, our new OP essentially requires this in most cases for lot creation. And I believe that the soils are readily available. Obviously, it's one more hoop that has to be jumped through for the applicant. There's no getting around that. But I believe that the soils are available. Mr. Pink may have some further comments. Thank you.
Mayor Kelly, then Councillor Nishikawa, and then Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you. I appreciate staff's input on this. I think I like the report, but I think there was an interesting argument, novel to me, that was raised by Ms. Mills, that really narrows the focus as far as I'm concerned, understanding Ms. Mills' submission. We may have policies, we may have an official plan that allows us to do certain things, but the legislation clearly proscribes what we can do and when we can do it. And if I understood correctly, and this is really directed to Director Pink, there has to be some form of development that would give rise to our ability to go in and impose these kinds of things by consent agenda or otherwise. And number two, and I only caught some of them, what we call out has to be appropriate, relevant. There's about 5 things. Can't read my own handwriting anymore, but there's about 5 things: reasonable, necessary, relevant, and important. Or yeah, we'll stop there. Reasonable and necessary. And so my simple question is there enough development proposed here? Is the simple act of lot creation development that would give rise to this right that we might have, or ability that we might have to impose these conditions? And number two, is what we're asking for reasonable, necessary, and relevant? I don't want to deal with that one until we figure out whether we're over the hurdle. Is this adequate development to give rise?
Director Pink.
Thank you. Through you. I believe Ms. Mills may be referring to some case law when it comes to that extent of test. But the Planning Act is very clear and does stipulate some of those. And just briefly, the approval authority, being council in this case, can impose conditions on the approval of a consent or a plan of subdivision if, in your opinion, it is reasonable and has regard to the nature of the development proposed. And it lays out a number of requirements or conditions. And one of them is very clearly that the owner of land enter into one or more agreements with the municipality. I think all I can add, I think staff has done an excellent job of explaining the policies and the requirements. But I think council, when they approved the recent official plan, was very clear that it's an environment first approach and to take a precautionary principle. And quoting from that official plan, very clearly references new lot creation on existing and new lots only being permitted where impacts to water quality can be managed, mitigated, or effectively eliminated. And it goes on to deal with vegetative buffers and their role, and very clearly states that they shall stretch across the entire water frontage when lots are being created and be at least 50 feet in depth. And it does, again, just quoting a few other areas. Again, when it's not just reconstruction or necessarily development, it does continuously reference when new lots are created. Shoreline buffer as it exists shall be protected and should be improved to the extent feasible through ecological enhancement. And again, goes on to require the soils as staff have noted. So again, staff are referring to the policies, our rights under the Planning Act, and suggesting that those conditions be imposed. Hope that helps.
Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I'm just a little bit, I'm not sure who my question would be directed to through you, but my understanding is that the applicant has already applied for a new septic permit. If I heard that correctly.
Ms. Crowder.
Through you, Chair Bosenworth, yes, they have, but work has not commenced as far as I am.
Okay, thank you. I guess my concern is that this particular application, I'm looking at individual applications, not what may happen down the road or what Buddy is doing next door, anything like that. I'm looking at this particular application and what this property owner has done. And I believe what the costs involved in just applying for a septic and do we not put faith in our like all of this language makes me concerned that there is already an area where our township has an ability to step in and say, we need this, this, and this. So for instance, when you build a septic system, they tell you whatever you need and you follow it. I'm not sure why we are not trusting the applicant in this way. And has there been something that has come up that we don't give some kind of recognition for their attempts to do the best thing? I'm not clear why the fact that, because in the past, we used to actually sort of respect that people have taken the next steps. I'm not sure why all of a sudden we're now planning is getting involved in how a septic system is built and what the products that are required for that septic system. I'm not sure where planning oversteps
Ms. Crowder,
the building code.
Mr. Sharp, perhaps then.
Thank you, Chair Bosworth, and thank you, Councillor Nishikawa, for your comments and your questions. I think as Mr. Pink explained, staff are simply reviewing the policies and making recommendations on that basis. We pride ourselves on treating applicants the same and being consistent in our recommendations. I don't think that there's a trust issue here. Certainly, that's not the case. So those would be my comments. Thank you.
If I could just ask a question, they have an application for us. I guess there's two questions. Are there two septic systems on the property today?
Through you, Chair Bosworth. So there's some uncertainty. We haven't gotten the septic report back from our septic inspector yet on this.
Okay.
So that's the one question. I don't know. I'm sure that the applicants can fill that
Alright.
in.
Yes, I would like, if you could come up and you have to give us your name.
Kathy Hess. I live at 144 Hannah Road in Toronto. I'm a sister of Nancy. I'm also an owner and applicant. So we applied for a septic permit in the fall before submitting these applications. We plan to have a new septic system service the cottage building, which is where my husband and I, family, typically stay.
Is that on the retained lot or the severed
That
lot?
would be on the retained lot. So we used a septic consultant. He came, we looked for the area where it would disturb the fewest trees. It's about 200 feet from the shoreline. It's far back. So we don't have any issue with being friendly to the environment at all. And we will do everything that's required as part of the permit. The permit was issued in November. And so no, construction hasn't started because it's winter, but we have someone lined up to do it in the spring.
And does the severed lot have a septic system?
Yes, an
All right.
existing aquifer system.
So my question, I don't normally ask questions, but my question would be not to you, to staff, thank you. But so thank you for your answer. Yep. We'll call you back if we need you. My question to staff is if they have a permit for a septic system, that all the technical requirements of having appropriate septic system will be covered under that permit and the construction of that. I'm just curious why we would add an additional requirement to put some wording into the consent agreement that it sounds like we're asking twice. And the second way of asking through the consent agreement is fairly onerous.
Through you, Chair Bosworth. So this is a policy that I think has been put in place after a lot of years potentially of thought and debate on council's end. And as staff, we review these policies and would apply this to any potential lot creation in this situation. So I think we want to remain consistent and apply it for any lot creation coming forward. So I think that it's been thoughtfully put here and staff are having regard for the policy and would implement this in this situation as we would for any future sufferance coming forward. I think that this septic permit issued through our septic inspector and the building department follows the Ontario Building Code. The building code may not, I would look to Mr. Pink to speak to the building code and exactly what is required through that permit, but it may not take into consideration this policy here and looking at those potential phosphorus binding and abatement technologies. So it looks like Mr. Sharp wants to speak.
Who would like to go first? Mr. Pink?
Sure, thank you. Just to expand on that, I'm certainly no expert in septic construction or the Ontario Building Code, but I believe the building permit or the septic permit will stipulate how that system is constructed, sort of where, its size, et cetera. I don't believe it will certainly require certain gradients and levels of fill to be brought in, but not necessarily stipulate the type of. Your consent agreement stipulate the actual type of soils and the elemental composition of such soils. And so it's sort of a two-part process. I think all I would also add again further to the policy comments, councillors may recall through the lengthy official plan review process very early, there was a very important policy direction that council stuck throughout the entire process. You may recall under the old water quality model, Mr. Sharp referred to it, there were enhanced protection for water quality on lakes that were identified as being vulnerable. And council made the decision that they wish to pursue enhanced water quality protection on all lakes. And you're going to consistently see these recommendations in this policy arise, not just on those lakes, but new lot creation, redevelopment, or any really planning applications on those lakes, whether it be site plan approval, zoning, minor variance, et cetera. These are policies, again, that council put in the new official plan, and staff will continue to raise them accordingly. If that helps.
Thank you. Just a subsequent question. If the septic system had already been installed, would we still be asking this requirement?
Thank you. Through you, that's certainly an issue that we are trying to work through with building staff. It is, I think what you're alluding to is technically correct. If it's in place, we'd have limited ability. However, the agreement would still stipulate a certain requirement, and we can work with the owner to tailor it accordingly to ensure it's functioning appropriately.
And just a final one, would there be a workaround that wouldn't require that the consent is it a consent agreement? Am I calling it the right thing? Yeah. Could we put a requirement in that says that the septic must be built before this severance is granted? As if it not have that in the consent agreement, would that be an option that you would be happy with?
Take some time to wrap my head around that, but through you, as I stated earlier, you have the ability to impose any condition that you feel reasonable on a consent. So it can include removal of buildings or certain installation of certain features before a consent is finalized and granted.
Mr. Sharp, then Councillor Masson.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify one point. The condition would require the use of these soils for both the septic system on the retained lot and the severed lot. There's a system on the severed lot today, and to my knowledge, there's no intention to replace it in the immediate future. But the way the condition is written and the way that it would work is it would be forward thinking. In other words, if the owners enter into this agreement, they would be required to use those soils when they go to replace the septic system on the severed lot. So it's forward thinking. And again, the intent is the overriding intent is to protect water quality. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Mazin.
Thank you. And through you, and perhaps to staff in this particular case, I think I heard correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard you say that there is a demonstrated history that this is a natural beach, not a man-made beach. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair Bosenworth, Councillor Mazan, yes. So aerial photography as far back as, I think it was 67. I could see the beach there. So
Okay. So as a supplemental with the overarching goal of supporting the official plan policies that the direction that we're trying to do, would this property be a good opportunity to work with the district shoreline rebuffering program to eliminate the us prescribing you need to plant 15 trees in order to satisfy some kind of criteria, but actually work with a unique situation? It removes us not being the experts as to whether wildflowers or grass are the right solution or trees or bushes. Is that something that could be contemplated or could be recommended by staff?
Who would like? Mr. Sharp?
Thank you, Chair. I believe that there has been one case in the past where the direction from Planning Committee was to work with that organization in order to come up with a planting plan. So certainly that is possible. I just need to think about how that would be implemented, whether it would be just some consideration to that if implementing this condition, or if we wanted to write that right into the condition itself and what Planning Committee's comfort level would be. Thank you.
Just a supplement.
Supplementary, yes.
I'm interested in that so that if there's a demonstrated history of stewardship on a piece of property and use, and this is a natural feature being a beach, right? That is a good thing. But I think what we have to be very careful of is becoming the experts in the how and when, and I say us being the council, not the staff, right? And so we have an organization here who may be able to work with as a partner to appropriately develop, and I'm not now even thinking the beach portion, but the portion in behind that would satisfy all parties. So
Mr. Sharp.
Thank you, and thank you for indulging. Thank you for indulging me. I just wanted to point out that the program I believe you're referring to is the Love Your Lake program, and they have staff that would come out and do an evaluation of the shoreline and make recommendations with respect to plantings. So I just wanted to clarify that. I didn't know if it was clear for everybody which organization we were talking about. Thank you.
thank you. I couldn't find it. I was Googling it because I thought this seems like an opportunity that we may want to explore and could satisfy as partners, but I don't know how to embed that into,
Right.
or if there's interest. So we can, I guess, include that in the discussion part afterwards. Thanks.
Very well. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much. We do have a septic re-inspection program, so we're going around even if the property isn't severed or anything else like that, right? So why would we take this out and that we can check the existing septic? If there's faults with it, they can fix it. It might be something simple. But would you not just leave that in? And again, with the shoreline revegetation, because we're leaving 87 feet of extra docking in there. So I don't think it's onerous to have site plan control. Thank you. Excuse me, so my question is that not right about what a septic inspection anyway for other properties? So why would we do this when we have a chance?
Director Pink.
Sure, thank you. Sorry if I'm not understanding the question exactly, but just to clarify, the septic reinspection program, it's on a rotating cycle, and every system is placed in a classification. And being a new system, I think it would either be medium and low, and you'd be looking at either, I believe it's a 10 or even a 20-year cycle. So it will be quite some time for the system is inspected. And further to that, those inspections are really just ensuring that the system is functioning properly and being maintained. What we're looking for is to ensure that it's built to a certain standard as per the official plan.
That's right, but I'm also asking about the existing system. I don't know when it was put in. So why wouldn't we just have it check it like we do anything else if we're going in the area? I thought this was a chance that we could bring our environment to a better standard if when we're doing severances or something like that, would it not be proper, as the staff are saying, to put an inspection in? That's all they're asking for.
Director Pink.
That it was inspected in this past summer and there were no issues raised.
All right, thank you very much. If I could ask the applicants, it seems that we in all likelihood will have an agreement. But rather than have staff direct how the vegetation should be done, would you be amenable to having, Mr. Sharp, what was the name of the organization?
The Love Your Lake program.
Love Your Lake program help with deciding what goes in there? All right.
Planted trees on it. that exist to the side of the boathouse, huge pine trees and cedars, we planted. We have no issue with planting on the property. What we have issue with is being told what we have to plant and where, because we're already doing it. That's as simple as it is. We're already doing it. And we don't feel that there should be conditions imposed, forcing us to when we are abiding by the rules. So I don't know the
Well,
program, so I can't really
No, I understand.
comment.
I think what you've heard here is that we have some very specific policies and we have to apply them. And so I'm not quite sure if there's a workaround that we can get to an answer on this. Yep. Fair enough. All right. Yep. Thank you. Councillor Burry.
Thank you. I'm going to make a couple of statements. So the first of all, I think the septic tank is a red herring. We're going to catch that through our building.
We still are in question period. I can read the resolution. Maybe we get to the point where we can.
So my question is, what makes us think we know how to remediate a natural beach into and a plane that comes into a beach that is naturally occurring? Why do we think that rehabilitating it with trees is better than wildflowers and other grasses, which I mean, we're not talking about someone that has changed a form to being a beach. We're talking about a natural beach. And what makes us believe that we as a community should say, we have no beaches in Muskoka?
Ms. Crowder.
Thank you. Through
then
you,
Mr.
Chair
Sharp.
Bosenworth. I think I need to clarify. The beach is natural. The area behind it is not. The area behind it was cleared. The applicant has told me this.
So sorry.
I'm so sorry, but my understanding was that years ago, you had told me that your ancestor had cleared the lands. Okay, I do have it written, but okay. You can see in the aerial photos that there was a fully forested area. I should say that. I shouldn't say somebody, I apologize. But you can see through aerial photos that there was a forest in this area. So staff aren't looking for the beach to be remediated. We're looking for some plantings to be put in behind the beach area, if that clarifies that.
Yeah, please. Mr. Sharp.
Thank you, Chair Bosworth. I think from staff standpoint, you know, at this point, it doesn't matter how the clearing came into place. The fact is that there is a large clearing. As Mr. Pink had pointed out, there are official plan policies in place that envision a shoreline buffer across the property, the full extent of the shoreline back 50 feet. The zoning bylaw requires a shoreline buffer extending back that distance with one tree every 100 square feet. I don't think that we're intending, you know, to have the applicants replant a forest. I think ultimately what we're looking at here is a proposal to create a new lot, which will confer additional development rights. And I think per the official plan, we feel that it's appropriate to achieve some plantings, and we always pride ourselves on not being authoritarian with respect to how we go about this. We work with the landowners to come up with something that ultimately they would be happy with. So whether it's, you know, 10 trees and some native shrubs, or whether it's a combination of those things with some wildflowers, great. Ultimately, all we're looking to do here is achieve an overall net benefit to the property. And unfortunately, really the only way to implement that, the only tool we have in our planner's toolbox is a consent agreement registered on title. So those are my comments. Happy to elaborate if needed. Thank you.
Councillor Nishikawa, if you have a question, if it's not a question, I'd prefer to
My question would
read the
be-
resolution.
Yeah, thank
Yep.
you. I just wanted the resolution read because I do have more to add, but
Very well. I'm
We're-
happy to
we're
do
not
that,
getting
and
there.
then you can be first up. All right, let me read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved, the Planning Committee will recommend to Township Council that consent application B5423ML be approved and subject to the following conditions: that a satisfactory registrable description of the severed lot, together with any required rights of way or easements, be submitted to the township along with a registered copy of the reference plan, that the confirmation received that the township is satisfied with the resultant lots are satisfactory for on-site sewage disposal, and that any problems identified with any existing sewage system be corrected to the satisfaction of the township. That a right-of-way be established over the retained lot in favor of the severed lot to provide mainland access, or that the availability of an entrance permit be confirmed by the township's operational services department for the severed lot. That the owners enter into a consent agreement with the township pursuant to the section 51(26) of the Planning Act. The said agreement shall be registered against the title of the lands and contain provisions to the satisfaction of the township whereby the owner agrees to use soils that have a demonstrated ability to effectively retain phosphorus or equivalent septic abatement technologies, which may include the use of soils with appropriate elemental composition to bind phosphorus or pre-post treatment phosphorus controls over the long term for a private on-site sewage disposal system on severed and retained lots, and to retain existing vegetation and to revegetate the shoreline buffer on the severed lot to the satisfaction of the township. And finally, that a zoning bylaw amendment application be approved to provide exemptions from waterfront residential WR1 zone maximum cumulative dock with requirements for the severed lot. All right, so I have read the resolution. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I wanted to ask or make the suggestion to remove those consent issues specifically around the septic. I'm finding this quite challenging, this discussion. From I'm just realizing that if I go to replace which I'm doing this year, replacing a septic, that in fact they're not going to capture. I'm just going to be using our local septic installer, and the application will go to the building department and planning won't see it, but they won't necessarily be able to I'm not sure how they're going to capture everyone that is replacing their septic to do exactly what we're asking this applicant to do right now. So I'm asking if this can be removed from this application. Also, I just wanted to ask as well that the applicant had mentioned that there was an existing septic, or there are existing septic lines in the areas that they want plantings done, and maybe that could be clarified, because that would be a real concern, because that's what you don't want to do. And I'm wondering even if that's why the area was cleared for a septic system. That wasn't very clear to me.
I will call you. No, the question, I would prefer an answer from staff if they have an answer. And I will remind the applicants, you need to be respectful of our staff. You cannot call people liars. All right, I know this is emotional. Let's try and keep calm. Ms. Crowder.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Bosenworth. As far as the plantings along the septic lines, I wasn't quite sure following that. So I'm wondering if maybe Councillor Nishikawa could just clarify that bit for me.
Could I please ask, could I please ask Ms. Mills just to comment? She commented that there was an existing septic or lines there. That's what I picked up on. If that was not what she said, then I picked up on that early on in her dialogue.
My recollections, and one of the applicants can confirm, but my recollections was that there were some weeping tiles along the beach, and I can't remember whether they help retain the beach or not, but I don't believe they're part of the septic system. Am I correct on that? The weeping tiles along the beach?
Could we hear from
Ms.
the
Mills?
applicant?
Yes, I've asked the applicant.
This is fine.
Turn your microphone on, please. Oh,
Can you hear me okay?
yes, absolutely.
There is a septic line that is in the area at the back that runs across, and we would never plant anything near that for obvious reasons. It's an anaerobic system, and it goes is pumped over into the wooded area. Again, in excess of 100 feet from the shoreline. But in the grass, so the shoreline buffer is 50 feet. 25 of those feet are beach. 25 of those feet are the grassy wildflower area. That's where all the weeping tiles are installed, have been for decades across that whole section, and they protect the shoreline. They prevent erosion. The cliff, there's waters that come down.
Are those the weeping tiles of your septic system?
No, weeping drainage tiles.
Drainage tiles to help.
Drainage tiles. Yeah.
All right.
To help the shore, keep the stability of the shoreline and the beach and the natural habitat there. So they're in place, and we're seriously concerned if and that's why we've never planted trees there. Because if we plant them, the roots will go after the pipe, like they'll break up the pipes. It makes no sense to us.
Staff, do you have any comments on that? I mean, now we're getting into areas where we require expertise to comment on that. And none of us, I don't think there's anybody in this room here who might be able to answer that professionally, but do you have any other thoughts, or does staff have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, through you, Chair Bosenworth. So we did discuss a bit the potential of getting an environmental opinion in regarding this, but at that point, you are looking at another financial burden. So I would say that potentially we could look at doing an area outside of those tiles, maybe a bit further back, because that would still provide a visual buffer when viewed from the lake, and potentially then we wouldn't have to worry as much about these tiles. But I think either at this point we would need an environmental professional's opinion, or an agreement between the two of us that's agreeable.
Councillor Mazin.
Thank you, and through you. And I think I keep coming back to this Love Your Lake program because I don't think there is a huge financial commitment, and it would get somebody who knows what they're talking about coming in and actually supporting. That's my understanding of the program. This is exactly the type of scenario that it could be a benefit, but if I'm wrong on that, that's I guess what I'm looking for direction on.
Yeah.
Because I think there's lots of history here. There's lots of if everybody in this room is having the shared goal of trying to protect the water quality and the environment and understanding what we're putting on, none of us here are equipped, I don't believe, at the council level to be making that kind of a decision. So I'm looking, I guess, I see Director Pink has his hand up, perhaps you could out.
Director Pink.
Thank you. Just to further clarify, I think the earlier comments and Mr. Sharp's comments as well, staff are not looking to, again, take away people's beaches or plant a forest and natural clearings. We're reasonable. We work with applicants. I don't think we have the expertise, or necessarily this is the forum to be debating the extent of plantings, or the crew should chime in, whether it's an arborist, a landscape architect, or the Love Your Lake program. I think the question really before committee is, do you feel this area warrants some ecological enhancement as per the official plan? Whether you do, I would recommend then you include it in the consent agreement. As Mr. Sharp pointed, that's really the tool in front of you, and staff will work with the applicant to come to hopefully a reasonable compromise and agreement on what's a reasonable amount of plantings here. We recognize there is a septic system in that clearing. We recognize there's a natural beach. We're certainly, again, not looking to plant on a septic system or plant on a beach. Again, so the question before you is whether you feel that's necessary. Or if you wish to leave that area open, the condition can easily be struck by staff and removed. Again, I think the details can be left for another day.
Mr. Sharp, did you have further comment? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much. I would like to get on with this, pass this the way it is, leave what staff have recommended with the plantings and that, get your Love Your Lake in there and see, because they will recommend natural vegetation that has deeper root system than, say, flowers or something like that. This has all been proven with it. Let's just get this on, let them work towards it, because we're just going around in circles here. And that staff have recommended. I will be voting for it if it's with the recommendations of staff. Thank you.
Director Pink suggested that that as a committee, we could recommend based on the pictures that we've seen, that we feel the shoreline, if we felt the shoreline was substantially vegetated, we could remove that clause with vegetation without impacting precedent on official plan like that, because that's essentially what it says we can do. So is there any, would people around this committee support removing that one? From what I've heard from Director Pink, I think we have to leave it seems to me we have to leave the clause in about the soil on the septics, not for the current ones, it's for all the future ones. But is there maybe a straw hand of around here who would like to take out the clause with respect to plantings? All right, so I think we are going to call a vote then. One last call for questions or comments. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. When I spoke earlier, I actually had requested that these conditions be removed, but I didn't hear the question asked of any other councillors. And I had hoped that that was going to be the case, that there would be that question I posed would go forward to other councillors.
Well, I could ask that question, but my sense is I don't get a sense around the table that we are considering moving both of these requirements. Is there any, I don't see any support for that, Councillor Nishikawa. But thank you for asking. Councillor Kent, you've got your hand up.
I would support the condition to take out the extra plantings requirement, as I believe that this property has been this way for a long, long time. It looks just like a property that has been that way for a long, long time. And the rest of the shoreline is so well buffered. It's a complete judgment call, but it seems a bit, I'd rather see limitations on docks than requirements on plantings here. Anyway, for what it's worth, I'd support you on that, Councillor Nishikawa.
Councillor Zavitz, your position on, we're doing a straw vote on whether to remove the requirement for planting.
Thank you. I could certainly support that. I think as Councillor Kent and Councillor Nishikawa have indicated, again, knowing the property and
I think we have.
Yeah, the naturalness of it. Thank you.
All right. So I think the majority of committee is happy with removing the requirement for plantings. So we need to amend we'll take, 3 or 4 minutes here to do the amendment, and then we will go through the process for amending it. Just to strike it.
The clerk prefers us to do an amending resolution.
That's what you'd be doing.
Yeah. So just bear with us for a moment. So for those in the audience, we have an amendment to amend the amendment, and then we will vote on the amended amendment. So. We do bring levity to these meetings occasionally. I know it can sound very dour. Sorry. All right, committee. You have to pay attention. Yes. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that the resolution be amended to remove the following wording: to retain existing vegetation and to revegetate the shoreline buffer on the severed lot to the satisfaction of the township. Any discussions? All those in favor? Carried. Now, but I just have to say that.
Yeah,
Right.
and then they take a quick vote.
So the final vote is to approve the main motion as amended. All those in favor? Councillor Kent? Thank you. That's carried.
Okay.
Applicants, we will potentially see you at
There's
council.
zoning.
Oh, we have the zoning application. Yes, you're right. Yeah. That was a severance. All right, this is the zoning application. Moved by Mayor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Burry. Be it resolved that the planning committee recommend to township council that the zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 02/24 be approved, subject to a restriction in the amending bylaw to prohibit additions to the existing docks on the severed lot. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. I think we're done on that one. Thank you very much, applicants. And this will now come to council next month. Yes, we're going to take a 10-minute bio break because we have some staff who needs bio breaks. Maybe everybody. So Yes. Our next case is B 5323 ML, and that is Ms. Walker.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Chair Bosenworth. The next application to be heard is consent application B/57/23 ML and zoning bylaw amendment ZBA-07/24 in the name of Scholz. The subject property is known municipally as 1060 Partridge Lane. I direct committee's attention to the submitted consent sketch starting on page 43 of the agenda package, and it's also on the screen in front of you today. A consent application has been submitted to create one new lot fronting onto Partridge Lane. A zoning bylaw amendment application has also been submitted to rezone the lands from rural residential RU1 to rural residential cluster RUR. The proposed amendment will provide exemptions from the minimum lot requirement in the RUR zone for the severed and retained lots. A zoning bylaw amendment also proposes to repeal bylaw 2009-154. Notice of this public meeting under the Planning Act was circulated 20 days in advance and 3 submissions have been received to date. Comments have been received from Sarah Campbell, planner for the District of Muskoka, Nick Snyder, the township's chief building official, and Tim Sopko, the manager of public works. These comments were all circulated to committee prior to today's meeting, and I can read any comments in full at the requested committee. I've prepared a detailed planning report for committee's consideration. Staff have recommended that consent application B/57/23 ML Scholz be approved subject to the standard conditions of consent, which are outlined in the staff report. Staff have recommended that zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA-07/24 be approved. No further comments, but I'm happy to assist with any questions. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Do we have Mr. Gallagher in the waiting room? Oh, you're here. Thank you. Welcome. You know the gig.
Thank you, Chair.
Name, address, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. John Gallagher, John P. Gallagher and Associates, a registered professional planner, 24 Hibbard Road, Huntsville, P1H 1C9. Thanks for having me here this morning. I'm here today with Elke Scholz, the owner of the property. We met with staff a number of years ago to get this started. We were sort of asked to hold off while the review of the OP was underway, and we did that. And once the policy was approved, we submitted an application. And at the time, it was just the consent. Staff asked us to group them together with the zoning, so that made sense, and we're here now. The application is for the creation of one new lot along Partridge Lane, and this is a residential cluster. It's almost its own settlement area. And on one side of the road, we have Muskoka Lakes, and on the south side, we have Bracebridge. And so one of the things that I wanted to look at prior to my review was to see the lot patterning in the area. So I pulled out the assessments and maps from the adjacent properties. And along Partridge Lane, directly to the east, the lot is 205 feet. Across the road, there's one at 90. There's several on the south side at 300. And the lot sizes on the north range from 205 up to 300 to 293. And the lot sizes, and when we look at lot creation, it's always looked at as the ability for it to sustain a dwelling, septic, some amenity area without negatively impacting on environmental features on the site. And in this case, there are no environmental features that would be impacted by the creation of the lot. The province has made it clear with respect to utilization of existing infrastructure. In this case, we have a municipal road that has school busing, hydro, etc. And this would be a limited infill type situation, and it is in character with all the lots in the area. The District has the application in the rural settlement area, and it's comprised of low density, which this is. The lot sizes are significant insofar as the ability to provide ample area. The difference in the frontage is minimal, that it wouldn't be noticed given the scale of it. Because there was a site-specific zoning previously when the previous owner severed off land, we had to go through the zoning amendment in this situation. I've reviewed the staff report. It's very thorough. I concur with the staff report. I would ask this committee to support their staff and approve the application with the recommended conditions of approval. We feel those conditions are reasonable and appropriate for the development of the lands. And I'd be glad to answer any questions. If there's any questions that I can't answer that Elke can, then we can do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gallagher. Are there any people wishing to speak in favor? None. And do we have anybody speaking in opposition? Very well. Thank you very much. Questions to committee? Do we have any questions of committee? Seeing none, I will read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Councillor Kent. Be it resolved, the Planning Committee recommended Township Council the consent application B5723 ML be approved subject to the following conditions. That a satisfactory registrable description of the severed lot together with any required right-of-ways or easements be submitted to the Township along with a registered copy of the reference plan. The confirmation be received from the Township that the retained lots and severed lots are satisfactory for on-site sewage disposal, and that any problems identified within the existing sewage systems be corrected to their satisfaction. The cash in lieu of parkland be dedicated to the Township in the amount of 5% of the assessed value of the newly created lot or the entire lands, whichever is less. The confirmation be received from the Township's Operational Services Department that an entrance permit is available for the severed lot and that a zoning bylaw amendment be approved to rezone the subject lands from rural RU1 to rural residential RUR to provide exemptions from the minimum frontage requirements and to repeal bylaw 2009-154. Committee, do we have any discussion on this? I see none. Let me call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. The next one related to this is moved by Councillor McIntyre, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that the Planning Committee recommend to Township Council that the zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 07/24 be approved. Any discussion? All those in favor?